Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ear. For the 103rd episode of Project Ecology, we're discussing not Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. We're discussing the last 4 episodes of The Rings of Power. I have no idea why I started it that way. It was just in my head. So here we go. We're going to keep rolling with it. My name is Dakota. I'm one half of your host. I'm joined as always with
Anthony.
And we have a special guest who has been a special guest for a couple episodes at this point. Rich, say hi.
Good to see you. I just like to know that for the rest of the episode, my name is Rich Ard. That's the name that I earned. All right, and okay, I'm Rich a proud Uruk.
Is that Richard the Orc?
Uruk. We got to get it straight. I mean, that's the name he earned, Anthony. Come on.
I don't want Rich to reach through the screen and strangle me.
Yes, because even though you're listening to us here on a audio podcast, we do look at each other through a screen while we talk to each other. So we have a lot to talk about today. The final 4 episodes of the second season of The Rings of Power. We finally have made it to the end, at least of the second season. I think I can say for each and every one of us that we are excited for what happens next. But today is going to be a discussion of strictly those 4 episodes with an overview of the entire seasons plus so far. And I personally enjoyed it a lot. Anthony, off the cuff, what did you think?
I thought it was fantastic. I feel like all the time that we spent watching both seasons really paid off by the end.
And Rich, I know you've watched this a couple times at this point. How do you feel having made it through this critical analysis, not only like just with the podcast, but like finally making it to these 4 episodes?
I'm super excited to be able to discuss it with you guys. Finally, I don't have to keep anything safe. I don't have to keep anything secret. I can just come out here and just, talk about how many booms I'm giving this show overall. And, just kind of, that's what we do. We bring the boom here, the Kazakh doom.
We bring the Kazakh boom. Yeah, I like that. My wife just looked over me and just like gasped inaudibly. Like she just put her hand to her face and just like, I cannot believe you said that. Anyway.
I may have been planning that all day long, by the way. So.
Nice.
So yeah, we have a lot to cover. I think before we touch on anything, I think we deserve to talk about the grand elf in the room, Gandalf. Anthony, you and I knew from the beginning this had to be Gandalf. How do you feel? Do you feel justified that the stranger is now going by his true and rightful name, his earned name, like Richard the Uruk over here?
It's so funny because you and I have been saying this, I think since the first 4 episodes of season 1, that we felt like that's who he was. So like getting that confirmation, it was gratifying. It was like, dude, like I felt like I knew from the beginning, but like actually hearing it was like, yeah, like that is absolutely who he is. And then seeing that like classic Gandalf the Grey staff.
I think I would have flipped my antique coffee table if it was just like, nice to meet you, Saruman. And I would have been so upset. I would have been like, no!
Rich was really trying to throw us off the scent by saying it was Radagast.
Yeah,
it could have been.
There was no smoke where there was fire in that one. But
I didn't know what to do anymore. I mean, I feel the same as you guys. I thought I right away kind of thought it was Gandalf, right? Like very early on. I thought it was pretty obvious. Actually, I won't lie to you. Now that I can kind of speak openly about it, at the end of season 1, we find out who Sauron is, or that Halbrand is Sauron, right? Yeah. And I was a little frustrated at the end of season 1 because I was like, you're going to make me wait. Come on. Like, this is so obvious. And, I hadn't liked the idea that we had 2 guys that we didn't know who they were. And then I was like, oh, at least it's going to be resolved. And when I got to the end of episode, that's why I said that season 1 frustrated me so much also. Like, later, once I know it's Gandalf and I can kind of be comfortable and I'm not thinking it might be Saruman, or like one of the other blue wizards.
Right.
I enjoy it so much more. But like while I'm waiting and thinking it might be Saruman, it just kind of, I was like, then how's he gonna go and like become a good guy and then turn he? And I don't know. There were so many questions like wrapped up in it that once I knew, I just enjoyed it so much more.
And then in this season, Sauron just kind of disappears halfway through, and this guy Annatar shows up. And who the heck is Annatar? I have no idea. Oh, we're gonna talk all about that later. But Anthony, before we get into any more of our discussion, what have you been up to?
Well, last week I had told you that Marvel Rivals was dropping, so I've been playing a bit of that.
Yeah, tell me about it. I've heard. To be honest, I've been off the internet, so I've heard nothing. But please tell me.
It's been pretty fun. They released, so on top of the characters that they had throughout the beta, they released a couple other characters. Like there's like Cloak and Dagger, there's Moon Knight, there's Captain America. There's several others, and they have a bunch that like have already been leaked that they're planning to put into the game. And I've been really having fun. I've played a lot of Cloak and Dagger. They're like support / damage. That balance kind of reminds me a little bit of Moira from Overwatch. Moira is a support character, but she also does like a lot of damage too. So like having that ability to kind of like swap between Cloak and Dagger, and they have their various abilities. I've also played a lot of Moon Knight. Moon Knight is pretty OP right now, and that's because like just like really like some of his abilities. And then there's the fact that a lot of these characters, they have like these team ups. So if you play certain characters together, they get like buffs and stuff. So it really is like a good idea to like really pay attention to like who your team is playing and trying to kind of like fit in with those characters so that you can kind of synchronize like a lot better. Like Cloak and Dagger and Moon Knight go together, and the Cloak and Dagger kind of gives Moon Knight this like kind of like an invisibility buff where he can go invisible for a little bit.
So Cloak and Dagger, based on everything that you're saying, is kind of like ice climbers in Super Smash Bros.
Well,
I'm just messing with you. I hate the ice climbers, but yeah, I do love Cloak and Dagger, and I have not played Marvel Rivals, so I'm trying to like come up with a parallel in my head.
You should definitely check it out. I mean, I know that you like Overwatch. I mean, there's Hawkeye in there, so I mean he might. And Hawkeye is a little bit on the OP side too. And
for now,
he may
until they get rid of his scatter shot.
So they may, so you may actually enjoy him because, that'll give you your Hanzo fix.
Yeah, nerf this, right? Cool, man.
And so, and as of recording this Friday, I'm prepping I'm going to go see War of the Rohirrim. I know that Rich had said that he's planning on going to see that on Friday also. I'm pretty stoked. We had already, I don't know if we had actually announced it on podcast. We'll probably reiterate it at the end of this episode. But after this episode drops, our next episode will be on War of the Rohirrim. And Rich is more than welcome to join us for the continued Lord of the Rings train that we've been on.
Yes, we're excited to see what the Peter Jackson side of the Lord of the Rings franchise holds, because that's like being brought back into this movie, and that's canon to those films, that the Peter Jackson, sextology, whatever you call it. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so I do not have my tickets yet, but I'm excited to jump into that. I didn't realize how like limited the screening of it was, but
I know, I didn't realize that either. But like so far, most of the theaters around me are showing it, so I have a pretty good selection.
My local theater, to Alamo Draft House, is showing the extended editions on separate days of the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, but not War of the Rohirrim. So I have to get out of my comfort zone a little bit and go to a theater that I don't usually frequent for that. But that's fine. It's okay. there's plenty of showings in my area, so I'm not worried.
That's all good. Oh, and we also had you had also brought up last week Skeleton Crew, so I actually finally got to sit down. I haven't watched the third episode yet, but I did watch those first 2 episodes, and I am glad to say that I'm enjoying it so far. I actually do like it.
Rich, have you been catching up with Skeleton Crew at all?
Yeah, I mean, so fantastic. It's
fun.
I think it motivated me to do something a little crazy. I can share it on this podcast because there's no chance my wife listens to this. So
excellent.
Essentially, also slightly motivated. I'm sorry to take this slight detour by Steve Cohen, the Mets owner, deciding that he was a boss and spending tons of money. I decided to go ahead and get my wife the Holy Grail, the Lego Millennium Falcon.
Oh
wow. Okay.
It's
a good thing I do not know your wife, because I would be texting her immediately about that. But no, that's really awesome. That's really cool. Rich, the Mets made a pretty seismic move within the past couple days. How do you feel? Juan Soto, former Yankee, went to the World Series, was fantastic, star player, was up for, what was it, a 10-year contract with the Yankees for like 500 mil or something like that. What was the feeling that you felt being a Mets fan and knowing that my wife's looking at me? She's a Yankees fan. She's giving me the stank eye. How do you feel having Juan Soto on the team?
There are so many emotions.
The Mets team, obviously.
So many emotions. I mean, first of all, I feel like somebody who bought Apple early, because I bought a 40-game season plan, 40-game half-season plan for the weekends. This is why I'm coaching now, so I can literally pay for those seats.
Nice.
I thought this year, something said to me, lock down seats. I don't think it's going to be as easy to get seats next year. I think you're going to pay more money. And now I've guaranteed myself opening day, I'm going to sell my Yankee tickets because angry Yankee fans are going to go to boo Soto at the stadium. And I don't want to see Yankee jerseys in my stadium. All right. And then I'm going to get playoff tickets. I'm going to go to one game with my family, sell the other game for an absurd amount of money because I'll be getting them at face value and not the stupid new pricing system they have.
Hold on. Are you planning to sell your subway tickets?
Oh, I won't. No. I want to be clear. I have only attended one Met Yankee game ever at Citi Field. The feeling of being surrounded by Yankee jerseys in my home is something that I will not tolerate. And I will not subject my son to seeing that. All right.
So Rich, okay. Do you have the answer to the question that everybody's been asking? Mm-hmm. Who let the Mets out, man?
Steve Cohen let the Mets out. This guy is just willing to spend all of his money, and I honestly love him for it.
And anger a bunch of Yankee fans.
You know what? Look, it's obviously a ridiculous contract. I think it's way too much money for any player. I have a deep fear that the Mets' luck is that he's going to twist his ankle in the middle of the season and never be the same again.
Oh man, it happens all the time.
Yeah, it does.
But I think what it does for the Mets is that it makes it now it's an attractive landing spot, more attractive than it's ever been before. It's like they're going for it. They're trying to build something. I might want to go there. And that's something we haven't had in my lifetime.
I like it. Cool, man. Yeah. So Anthony, I don't know. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's Juan Soto was contracted onto the Mets for something like $700+ million over the course of 15 years.
Oh my.
It's a crazy contract.
That's crazy. How old is he?
It's 26 years old. So it's 765 for 15 years. But after the first 5 years, basically there's an option where the Mets he can opt out if the Mets don't increase his salary for the last 10 years of the contract by $4 million a year. So that similarly happened to Garrett Cole this year, where the team declined to opt out of the contract, essentially, or decline that raise. And Garrett Cole could have left the Yankees, but he chose to just not take the raise and stay with the team. So
that's a crazy contract. That's like pretty much like the entirety of like the rest of his time as a pro player.
He gets
that's the goal.
Right.
He gets a suite, 4 premium seats a year. His family has a personal suite all year. The Yankees apparently would not budge on the personal family suite. So
really,
yeah, that was a sticking point.
That's so strange.
A slight sticking point.
Yeah, that's so strange. Okay, well, whatever. If that was a big, I guess, sign-on bonus to become a Met, I'm happy for him.
The Mets have been let out, man.
Yeah,
the Mets have been let out.
Whew.
Cool. As far as what I've been up to, not a whole lot. Again, I've been watching Skeleton Crew. I watched episode 3. Fantastic. I will say it's slowed down a little bit now that they've met the Jude Law's character. I don't want to get too much into spoilers here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very cozy show, if that makes any sense. Like, it's just something, roll up with, like a hot chocolate and just kind of be a kid for 30 minutes. It's a really fun show. Some really interesting alien characters. That's like my biggest takeaway, is that like some of the alien characters are just so creative, especially in this third episode. There's a character that looks like an owl, and it's just I love the way that it's one of those things, like, I can't tell if it's like CGI or practical or just a mix of both, and it's fantastically done. And that kind of wonder keeps me going for the entire episode. So I like that kind of stuff a whole lot.
Star Wars is becoming like D&D. They're just adding more and more different types of species like every year.
Oh yeah, I mean, Star Wars has been doing that from the beginning, really. But it has become very D&D-esque in that sense. So yeah, I agree. Creatively, I've been hard at work writing my scripts for the Avatar timeline. I know I've been talking about this for months, but this is, it means a lot to me to get this right the first time. So I'm trying to do my best over the course of weeks and months. But I'm excited about that. And there's been a lot of, I don't want to get into like crazy details about this because I know most of the audience doesn't care, but there's been a lot of leaks in regards to the third Avatar series. If you're looking for it, like if you're in that bubble, you will know all about it. Like, the Avatar is named, the premise of the series is kind of explored. The setup for how the series takes shape is totally detailed. And I feel bad for Avatar Studios because, like, clearly this wasn't meant to get out this way, but there's concept art out. There's, names of characters. There's, like, ages and potential, I don't want to say villains, but, like, mysteries. Like, we already kind of know the big mysteries of this series, at least for the first season. So I'm really like floored by how much has come out about this show that is coming out in a couple of years, but we have absolutely zero information about the Avatar Aang movie that's coming out in a single year. Like, it's coming out next January, not this coming January, but next January. We have no idea even like what the like finished title for the film is. We have no idea what the setting or the story is for that, but we know almost everything there is to possibly tease about the show, like the third Avatar series that's coming out after that movie. So just craziness.
That's crazy, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about like spoilers on that because spoilers.
Sounds good, man.
Guys, should we explore some of the powers that these rings hold, and like what I think we should. Yeah, like, so in the lead up to, I think it was the second episode that we recorded about the Rings of Power, I had a little prediction about where I thought the general guideline of the multi-season arc was going to roll out. So the first season we saw the forging of the Elven Rings. I posited that the second season would be the forging of the Dwarven Rings, the 7 Dwarf Rings, and the third season would be the forging of the 9 Human Rings. I was a little bit off there. It seems as though the rings are already forged by the human rings that is are already forged by the time that this season concludes. but none of them have been distributed to the human rulers at this point.
Right, but you still tracked that it was like elves, dwarves, and then humans. It's just off a season. But yeah.
Yeah.
It still went that way.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how and when Sauron decides he needs to make a final ring for himself. He's clearly not allowed in Eregion anymore, especially now that Eregion is destroyed. So we're gonna have to see when and if he decides, why don't I just forge it in this really hot volcano over there in the Southlands?
We have the thing is, if I'm trying to think of the men or the kings, right? And if I remember correctly, isn't Elendil supposed to be the king of Gondor at some point?
You're talking about Isildur's father.
Yeah.
I don't recall off the top of my head, but I thought he was a leader, or I thought he was from a race of kings within Numenor, but not within the main part of Numenor, but the western side of Numenor or something like that.
Yeah, I think
I might be off.
I'm just trying to. I there's a part of me that feels like he's a king of Gondor at some point, and we haven't seen anything of Gondor. We don't know what state Rohan is. We have not met any of the rulers. So I know technically the forging happened in season 2, but I feel like there's got to be a lot of world building that we don't we don't even know one. I mean, other than I guess Elendil, right? We don't know anybody who would possibly get rings really of men, and he, to my knowledge, is not one of the 9. Anyway.
Yeah, so I think what's fascinating is we only ever see one dwarven king.
Yeah, I was actually about to say that, and there's 7, right? So
there's 7 dwarven
right,
rings,
and we only really see one at play.
So I think they tease at the end of the season that the other dwarven nations are have already paid tribute to Durin and are expecting their returns, which I'm assuming means they are expecting a ring.
Well, and it also sounds like there's probably going to be a bit of a power struggle because Durin's brother kind of it seems like he wants to make a play for the throne too.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hello, survivors. Have you ever wondered if you have what it takes to survive a zombie apocalypse, an alien invasion, or a tyrannical government?
Well, tune in to our podcast every Friday at 7 a.m. where we discuss just that.
You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Just search Will You Survive the Podcast.
Yeah, there's a lot that needs to happen in season 3 and 4 because first of all, we've never even met Durin's brother, so I have no idea what this even that line was such a throwaway. Oh, by the way, maybe you're not the king.
That's why I just feel like 8 episode seasons it's just not enough, man. I
find this funny because each episode, the minimum length for an episode in the season is 62 minutes. I was I could not believe, how long each episode was, because altogether we probably got 10, 11 hours worth of footage. I mean, that's plenty of time.
Well, I mean, but the thing is that remember back in the day, there was a lot of shows that were maybe about 45 minutes, and you would get 26 episodes. Now 45 minutes, that's about 15 minutes shy of what we got, but still that's close enough. I'm not saying to give me a whole 20 episode season, but it was 26, and then the standard dropped down to 15, 16, then we went down to 13, then we went down to 10. Then now we're down to 8. What's going to be next? 5?
Well, some shows are definitely in the 6 episode range. A couple of the Marvel shows have been 6 episodes, and it's very clear these were meant to be movies and were just cut down to size.
Right, and a lot of them are limited series. This is a full blown series where like, I mean, dude, like Game of Thrones, like we had 10 episode seasons, and then which seasons are the ones that really started to suffer was when they started trying to cut them down.
I agree. I don't disagree. And I will say, while I don't necessarily think that they need more episodes, I am happy that they aren't time constrained per episode, because a lot of shows, I think of like Lucasfilm. It seems as though even their like 45-minute shows like Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, that kind of show, twice or so per season, they'd have like an episode that's like 25 minutes. And it's like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
How do you like budget
wild.
a show like this? And it like consistently every season. We don't have this with Rings of Power in that same respect, because each episode is almost like a mini movie.
And I think that the last 2 episodes were like the longest.
They were in the 70-minute range. Yeah. It was really impressive. I mean, I do think that there is so much to Tolkien's lore that you can expand it to potentially, like, well, I mean, that's why they have 5 seasons planned, I guess, right? But you're right, Rich. Going back to what you were saying, we don't know about any of the great human races on Middle Earth, because Numenor has been, taken out of the equation for probably 1,000 years, the entirety of the Second Age. So we don't have anything Gondor, we don't have anything Rohan, we don't have any humans outside of like the scattered villages of the Southlands.
Yeah.
And those were loyal to Mordor and Sauron, or before Mordor. They were loyal to Sauron. So we don't know what the other races of men look like on Middle Earth at this point, because pretty much we've been following the high men, the Hyman, the
Dunedain,
the Dunedain, the people of Numenor, who live a little bit longer than the normal humans, but not as long as elves. So you're right. We need to see more of anything regarding humans outside of the Southlands, basically.
Well, hopefully next season we start to see a lot more of that, and hopefully we start to see, because I highly doubt that next season is going to show all 9 rings distributed, but we still need to see more of the dwarves, and then those rings being distributed out to the dwarves, unless they already are and we just didn't see it.
So there are a couple jumps throughout the show that I feel like happen out of nowhere, and it's really hard to tell how much time is actually passing. So in the beginning of the first season, the elves go to the dwarves to request that they help them build a new forge for Celebrimbor.
Yeah.
In the time that the show occurs in, it feels like it's been maybe a couple months, maybe. But clearly, based on the, the forge is completely finished by the time the second season starts. We don't really get all of that time jump, but it's probably been 4 or 5 months if the dwarves are like really fast at making forges. I have no idea. But I think overall we're probably looking, at a period of about a year, maybe 2 years that have passed throughout this show. And I think that's a fault of the timeline, because we know that these events are being compressed from the entirety of the Second Age into a watchable season of television. So because they have to say, Celebrimbor needed the dwarves' help, and that's how they found out about the mithril, and that's when Sauron found out that, Celebrimbor had mithril, and that's when he requested that everyone gets rings. So all of this stuff is happening, but really, in a realistic time frame, this would happen over the course of years, not months. But it needs to happen over the course of months, because not a lot of other stuff is happening for the story to take place. So it's kind of like a paradoxical thing where in reality months, maybe years are passing, but in actual like visual time on screen, we're only seeing days or weeks pass, So it's a weird thing. That's probably my biggest criticism coming out of these 2 seasons.
Well, what they did was they jumped through like a wormhole that really shot them into the future. But dude, I didn't even really think about it, but yeah, they didn't really show like they talked about the need of a great forge, but they didn't show it actually really being built. It was just, it went from inception to completion just like that.
100%. Yeah. Rich, are we missing something here? Like,
it's impossible. They're doing, I think they're doing a generally fine job, because all of this stuff is supposed to happen over years and years and years.
Yeah.
Right? It's not something that unfurls slowly. Quickly like this. So, I didn't even think that there was that much passage of time really demonstrated. I mean, there's a couple of times over the episodes where when Elrond and Durin have a conversation, he's like, "Oh man, some things have been happening to me," and he's like, "I don't think it's as bad as what's been happening to me." And he's like, "I gotta overthrow my dad," and then Elrond turns around and he's like, "Well, I got a lot going on too."
Yeah.
So that made it feel like there was some time passing, and we know that
that's a good point.
Durin spent that time where he was, not in the good graces of his dad. And you would think, unless he's an incredibly financially irresponsible prince, that, he kind of got, like, his daddy cut his credit card off and they were kind of destitute for a while. And I don't think you become destitute in 3 days. I don't.
Excellent point. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. You don't just tighten your belt and get a new job and get beaten up by your coworkers in the span of a week. But that's what we see of Durin, and it does seem like it's happening very quickly. But obviously it needs a little bit of time, and I think that's kind of the unfortunate historical aspect of Tolkien's awareness. He's aware of the passage of time. He's aware of how history works on a macro level, and he can tell these stories, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this is over the course of 100 years. But for a show like this to really get that stuff across, you need to tell it like you would any other show, this back to back to back to back, instead of 5 years later, Durin isn't allowed to buy the really nice mushroom he sees at the grocery store. Stuff like that. Let's stick with the dwarves a little bit, because I did find that to be one of the more fascinating aspects of these last 4 episodes of season 2.
Yeah.
Specifically when it came to the ring, because we haven't really talked about King Durin too much prior to this point. But what struck me is that he's a very cautious, very reserved, and very wary king. He doesn't want to get involved with other people he doesn't know. He doesn't want to dig too deep, just on the off chance something goes wrong. And I even wondered, does he know about the Balrog, and that's why he doesn't want to dive into the mithril mines? Is that why he's stopping all production going forward?
It's interesting that you say that, because I feel like he knew something. If it wasn't specifically the Balrog, I think he knew that there was something going on, because he was very adamant about not mining the mithril.
It was dogmatic in a way, it was just no, this is the law, we cannot do it. And this is he was saying it in a way that was just, for the safety of everyone involved, we can't do this. But clearly all of that went out the window the moment he got, the literal moment that he got the ring on, because it was the next day where he had entirely changed his tune. I don't know if it's the next day. Yeah, again, it's the time passage in the show is very confusing, but it seemed as though it was the next day.
And you can see the influence over time of the ring.
It was scary.
It was he essentially became a shell of his former self, And Prince Durin, he saw that, and he knew that it was the ring. He could tell he completely changed after he started wearing that ring, and even Disa had picked up on that.
Yeah. Rich, you have anything to say about like Durin's quick transformation from wary, thoughtful king to completely greed-driven?
Well, there's a couple things I'm trying to kind of parse out here. So the rings that the elves have seem to, generally speaking, have no ill effects on the wearer. And if we kind of go by the understanding that we know that Galadriel still has her ring, I believe in Jackson's canon, right? If she has that ring, and it doesn't seem to have any ill effects. So the same exact process, give or take, was used to make the dwarven rings. The only thing that we can see at any point with forging is that when the rings of men are forged, those have Sauron's blood, right? Like at some point,
that's crazy. That was crazy.
That's his malice poured into it, right? The kind of like the one ring. And so I understand how the Ring of Men and the One Ring, right, have his malice directly in it. So that's far more. It has a far more powerful effect on the wearer. I just don't see. And then there was that one ring that was messed up that Mirandir wore, and she went into like the shadow realm and she became invisible. I wish we could kind of understand. Like, I don't get it. I can't tell you this is what these rings do to these wearers and why one is different than like what the elves have. Is it just their natural? I guess
there's a couple ways to look at it. For the one thing, it seemed as though before Sauron dropped the mithril into the concoction for the Dwarven rings, it seemed as though he put a little curse on it. You know, like he kind of closed his eyes, he kind of whispered something, he dropped it in. We don't see that with the forging of the elf rings, but he does touch the mithril. He's just like, what ore is this? And in that moment, he could have put something on it. You know, like there is a connection there where he physically touched the mithril ore before that was inserted into the elven rings. So that is fascinating. I think obviously the major points that I think Tolkien might have made was that the elves, their statute is of such a pure nature that it may not have affected them in the way that it would affect the other wearers. Either way, they did become reliant on the rings. You see that a couple times throughout the beginning of these first couple episodes. Even slight ways, like when Galadriel put her ring on, there's a creepy smile like she like puts on her face. Like it's just like everything I've ever wanted is right here in my hand sort of thing. And that's exactly what Sauron wants. He wants you to feel like everything that you want is going correctly. And that's kind of what he did with the Dwarven rings, right? He made them to fix a problem that ultimately he kind of created. You know, he wanted it was his plan for eventually Mount Doom to erupt and for all of these Dwarven mining operations to become extremely dangerous because of X number of curses he's placed on the world as it is. So these rings, with the mithril infused nature of them, would help the wearers fix whatever problems they deem fit. And I think that's a key factor, is that the mithril is, you know, connected to the Silmarils, which goes back into the Silmarillion, which goes back into the Untold Tales of like Tolkien's lore. And these were created by Feanor as 3 great stones of power, much stronger than the actual rings of power. But because the rings are so deceptive and you know, given as gifts and unassuming, I guess, you know, it's a ring, it's an unassuming thing. These gifts to elves, dwarves, and man are more powerful, even though they're less powerful, just because of the fact that they can corrupt the mind. especially with Sauron as the influencer. So I think it's interesting that you point out that he doesn't even bother putting Mithril into the Rings of Men. At that point, he's just like, you know what? I tried. I'm just going to give him pure evil. He cuts his hand. He's like, this is from the Mithril mines. You know, it's like a jar of Mithril.
But it's crazy, dude. Like, he uses like some sort of genjutsu on this guy.
Dude, he's completely flabbergasted. Celebrimbor is like, he's literally.
I felt so bad for him. I felt so bad for Celebrimbor. Like, as the season went on, like,
oh my god,
like my heart was breaking for this guy.
He was like Theoden, and with like Wormtongue. Like, he's basically crawling on all fours. He thinks he's in charge, but he's being deceived left and right.
Right.
Yeah. So with the human rings, it's fascinating that there was no mithril infused into them. So it's just evil power.
Yeah.
That's all that's in that ring, or those 9 rings. It's just evil power. There's nothing in them to fix whatever issues the humans are experiencing. It's just evil power. And
so
I think
it makes sense why they would turn into ring wraiths.
Yes.
Because, I mean, it's just like straight up, like he dosed it. So we're talking a little bit about like, the rings. And what it seems like Sauron's real power is when you allow him to, you let him in, like you kind of, as soon as you let him in, you kind of give him access to your mind. And it seems like the rings like really amplify that power. And so it's like the rings are the doors for which Sauron just can open and just be like, hey, just like influence you in that kind of way. And like, yeah, man, like you said, like with the human rings, like he just used his blood, and it's just like full on influence with this one.
Yeah, I did like that he tried. He went to Khazad-dûm. He spoke with the king. He's just like, I gave it my best shot. I also happened to notice that there was a Balrog right below you guys. Gonna use that against you really quickly, but I don't really care because I'm just gonna use my blood. I don't need the mithril. He could easily have just like snuck down, grabbed he could scoop mithril out of anywhere. Like that place is full of mithril. He chose. I love the fact that he went there like earnestly. He tried. He's just like, you know what? This is for the little humans. We're gonna do something nice for them. Durin's just like, nope, and he's just like, I got a second option anyway. Don't worry.
My blood. What about that scene that Celebrimbor thinks he hears something, like he hears like the panic outside, and he goes outside. Sauron tries to stop him for a little bit, but then he goes outside and then everything looks perfectly fine. Dude, like that was insane. That scene was so crazy. And that's why like I'm kind of getting like, he's so embedded in Celebrimbor's mind that like, yeah, dude, he used genjutsu on this guy.
I turned to my wife at that moment. I was just like, at this point, I'm on Sauron's side. Like, this is like crazy levels of just like reality manipulation. I'm, like he deserves to win at this point. Come on,
dude, that man, like he was like Thanos in that moment, like the reality stone. Like it was so insane. And then when he goes back in, and then like how the camera pans, and then it shows the reality, I was like,
dude, fantastic.
Dude, like it was so crazy. And I'm so happy because I feel like Lord of the Rings isn't Lord of the Rings without a really good siege.
Oh yeah. Rich, why don't you talk about the siege of Eregion a little bit? Like, what are your thoughts now that you've seen it a couple times? How do you feel about Adar's plan to take siege over Eregion? Is it obvious that it's Sauron's plan all along? Like, what are your thoughts?
So, well, there's a couple. Well, all right, a couple questions about elves and their ability to fight. Right?
Sure.
You know, I guess maybe spoiled by Celeborn, by Legolas, obviously, right? I always feel like I say his name a little bit wrong, but Arondir.
I think you got it right.
Like, finally. I don't, even if Eregion is quote-unquote understaffed at this moment, slightly skeleton crew-ish, I don't understand why they... I mean, I understand the orcs have large numbers, but, Legolas would kill, 40-something without blinking. He would just rapid fire. Even, what's her name? Evangela Lilly, you guys' favorite character in the Hobbit series. She, was it Feely's love interest? Keely. I think it's
No
Keely.
clue. Honestly, literally no clue.
Well,
But she killed, she was great. And it just feels like you have Elrond, who's a very good warrior. You have, his crew. But then the others seem to be woefully unprepared for battle. I don't know if this is the Coast Guard. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm insulting somebody right now. But it just seems like the lower ranks of their
Well, we know
forces.
that Eregion is full of smiths. It's not necessarily full of warriors. Obviously, there's warriors in there, but we don't really have too much knowledge of their personal prowess on the battlefield. Obviously, the army that the king and Elrond showed up on, the army that they showed up with is and proved to be more skillful than, the archers that were on the wall, basically, that were already there.
I think that they overwhelmed them with sheer numbers. I mean, let's take a look at the elves that fought at Helm's Deep. They were getting rocked too, and they were specifically I think that those were actual warriors. And by the end of that battle, not an elf was alive except for a Legolas.
That was right. And yeah, I do like the fact that I think it's in Helm's Deep. There's that same shot where the wall gets taken down and then there's just the orcs flooding in. Or wait,
No,
that's the Battle of Gondor?
No, that is Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
It is Helm's Deep, right? And I just kind of love that siege warfare. I mean, I do want to know how the orcs knew that was the weak point of the wall when Celery Bimbo was...
Celery Bimbo.
He looks down, he goes,
Celery
that's the
Bimbo
weakest...
returns.
That's the thinnest part of the wall, or that's the weakest part of the wall, and they were able to take it down.
That was interesting.
I think the whole thing is Celery Bimbo said that's the weakest part of the wall, and he pointed at it, and they're like, that's the one we got to get at, guys.
He's pointing at it.
Roll the machine.
Go for it.
He let it out of the bag. I mean, that was pretty cool. I loved the archer that's part of... I don't think I recall. I'm not even sure if she is named, but she's rolling with Elrond through the battle, and she's like, I don't know what I can do, and he's like, even one arrow could help us. And she ends up,
and then she just gets arrows. Rocked by a bunch of arrows. He's like, just one arrow. Bum, 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 bum. I was like, oh my gosh.
Wolverine
that was
in the Wolverine.
I was like, that is so unfortunate. But no, you're right. And then finally we got the hill troll that came into play.
Yeah,
I love that guy.
He's kind of instrumental in what happens later because it is Adar's. I don't know if that Uruk is his actual son or just his closest and number one.
I think it's the number one. Yeah.
And he says, "Hey, if we, Lord, if we release him, or Father, if we release him, he'll hurt our own kind. He'll kill our own kind." And without even looking back, Adar just says, "Release him."
Right. And all of that was really playing into what Sauron wanted, man. All of those decisions, Adar had become so adamant about taking down Sauron that he was willing to put all of his children in danger, and so that started, they started to see that and the shift was starting to happen, and they started to look at him unfavorably, he really doesn't care about us, and it got him killed in the end.
True. It was, of course, all of these decisions that Adar made that eventually, poisoned the mind of his followers. That wasn't enough for them to turn on him at the end. Obviously, Sauron's influence.
Yeah.
That evil spirit that he, twists within people's minds. That's clearly what happened. when they were like, it's too late, and then they started attacking Adar.
Well, there's that, but like everything else leading up to that were opening doors for that influence to really like
100%. 100%. Yeah. I think of I don't know if you ever watched like Passion of the Christ or anything like that, but there's the scene where Jesus is being accused by Pontius Pilate, and you have the figure of Satan walking behind the crowds, just inciting them to hate and like hate towards Jesus specifically. And it seemed like that's kind of the role that Sauron was taking with Adar's army. Like he wasn't conscious, or he wasn't like physically telling them, you gotta hate this guy, you gotta kill this guy, but his just spirit of malice was forcing them to mob mentality against the person that they had lost their faith with. And I think that was a really interesting, I guess, transpiring. I don't know. It was interesting too. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but they used the same camera angles. Like when all the orcs were like on top of Adar, as they did at the beginning of the season when they were on top of Sauron, stabbing him crazy.
Mm-hmm. I wonder. So this is a very elaborate plan on Sauron's behalf, but he does demonstrate to have an incredible amount of power. And I wonder if it's like a Jedi type mind weakness, like you can force weaker minds, because he could have, and granted, in his time in Eregion, he could have gained power. I don't know if he's like Santa in Elf, where he like, the more that believe in him, the more power he gets. Because why he wasn't able to completely convince Galadriel even through illusion. I'm not sure if that's just because she's stronger willed. But then you have her, and then you also have Adar, because he never tried to. It would be much simpler if he just overpowered Adar, right, and got him to not, to believe in him, to buy into him. But he ends up kind of flexing his muscle, and who knows if Celebrimbor is one of the weaker kind of characters, and that's why. Or I don't know if we're just supposed to see that it's his pride that is so much more of a flaw than the other characters.
I think that's an interesting point, like the idea of pride being a flaw, because in some ways it can be, it can definitely be a crutch for people, and Sauron is used to, as we've seen throughout the series, he looks for people's crutches. He looks for what they are trying to achieve. Celebrimbor is trying to achieve perfection. He's trying to achieve purpose, and Sauron shows up with a purpose for him. He shows up with a way to perfect his craft.
Yeah.
And that is him speaking to his pride, and that is him letting Sauron into the picture. Anthony, you mentioned that it's like opening a door. And it's almost like opening a door to a vampire. Like, everyone knows you're not supposed to invite the vampire in, but just opening the door isn't enough. You need to, accept them into your house. Right. For you to be in danger of the vampire. And that's basically what's happening with Sauron right here. He is coming up to people's doors. He's showing them what they want, and then they're letting him in. And I think that's such a fascinating aspect for the character.
Right. And in Galadriel and Celebrimbor, they have that exchange where he gives her the 9 rings, and he's upset, he's distraught about how he was able to be tricked so easily. And, Galadriel, like, pretty much was like, look, I understand. It's like, as soon as you let him in, he takes hold. And you open the door for him, that's it. Like, he can, as soon as he gets to know more about you and what you need and what you're about, he's a chameleon, man. Like, he can shift it so easy.
I feel like we could make a whole podcast about just
Sauron alone, yeah.
Sauron, because he's such a fascinating villain. Every scene that he's in, he steals. I love the journey he takes from Halbrand to Annatar to eventually back to Sauron. Like, he eventually just devolves back into, I gotta get these rings made, dude. What are you doing?
Yeah, and holding his people hostage, pretty much like, hey, look, I'll stop the siege, but you got to do this.
It is interesting, Anthony. You mentioned that one of the rings that they had like created. We don't know what they use in the creation of that ring or whatever. Maybe they did try his blood, and maybe that is how she went invisible and went into the unseen world. That could be a possibility.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens to the Rings of Men, and I hope they put like 3 of them on Farazan, because like he needs to go down.
That 3 of them, oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like we've like talked, quite a bit about, the siege of Eregion. I mean, that takes, I would say that a lot of that takes center stage of this like season, like especially towards the end.
For sure, yeah.
By the end of the season, Numenor is like in complete chaos, man.
Yeah, so they had basically a stolen election, right? Like they had a coronation ceremony. They had a queen ready to take her oaths, and then an eagle shows up, and then everyone's just like, "Yo, Farazan," and he like took this good omen of there being an eagle at a coronation as the opportunity to like announce himself as king. And then we have a whole bunch of nonsense throughout the season.
The queen just keeps on like proving herself, like so
every time. So
Elendil was supposed to receive the judgment of the Valar, right? And that pool of water or a pool of ocean, like it was kind of a closed off space, but the queen decided to take his place. And that scene was really, really cool. She gets dragged down underwater. Do you know what the name of that creature was?
I think they called it the sea worm.
Oh, okay.
But that's the same beast that showed up early on in the first season of the show. I believe, like it was the same like face.
Was
structure.
that okay? I didn't know if it was the same. Oh, but I mean, she survives that instance, and then like everybody's like kind of back on the queen's side, and then then your boy, he's just so upset about this stuff that he just keeps on making up stuff like, all the faithful, they're all traitors, and this person is a traitor, and so like they're trying to kill like off everybody. And yeah, Elendil's like daughter was like pissing me off like the whole season.
Dude, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? I was like questioning like her loyalty and like what her even motive is, like by the end of the first season. This season she's like completely gone off the deep end in terms of just like, who are you siding with? Like, can you not see that this guy is just like the worst possible choice for ruler? Like, what are you basing your
I think she realizes it
over?
In the end.
Yes,
she
100%.
definitely realizes it, and so she like helps her father escape. But like, yeah, she's starting to see like, okay, this guy's a little crazy. So yeah, and something that and it kind of ties a little bit back to what Rich was talking about, like Elendil, like, maybe him being a king of Gondor. The queen does say for him to reclaim his lordship, and and gives him Narsil. Dude, like I was like, oh my gosh, dude, the sword! It's the sword.
Yeah,
I was like, the sword that eventually, it gets shattered and reforged and goes to Aragorn. But dude, like I was like, man, it was so cool to see that sword, man.
Yes, I also had that freak out moment. The moment the word Narsil was said, I was just like, the blade that was broken. Oh my god,
the line that was shattered.
Yeah, so I'm looking it up. The power of Google is amazing. Yes, Elendil was the first High King of Gondor in Tolkien's lore.
So it seems like it's gonna be on track for that. Like, he's gonna be making his way. I really do like the casting for Elendil. Like he does have that very like honorable,
regal.
Like he I just feel like in general, like a lot of the casting was really good. The actor for Sauron just like knocked it out of the park. So yeah, there's a lot of that. And then we have we haven't really talked about, I mean, we talked a little bit about how Gandalf, he finally got his name, but there over in Rune we have Poppy, Nori, and we call him Gandalf now. They get separated after that whole like sandstorm that he conjures up, and they meet these like they're other like halflings kind of like them, but they live in the hills, and
they share a lineage.
Yeah.
There's a clear breaking off point that we learn about, where one part of their history spreads to a nomadic tribe, and the other continues in on that canyon that they're residing in. So I thought that was really cool, because ultimately hobbits are yearning for hillsides that they can dig into, that they can burrow into.
Yeah. And so Gandalf he's given a choice for Tom Bombadil like tells him he brings him to a place to find his Gand, his staff.
His Gand.
And so he's like, you can either, you have a choice. You can either, is it going to be destiny or is it going to be friends? And in the end, it was really all a test.
Yeah, Tom Bombadil like really should have like given him a hint about that, because that was kind of a cruel test. Like you will stop being a wizard if you go for your friends, or you can be the greatest wizard ever, but your friends will die. Like it didn't seem. That's not a fair test. Yeah. It really is not. Obviously, he chose the right path, because that led him to the staff that he ended up choosing. So one thing that I want to look up. I don't necessarily understand how certain things match up so closely to the Peter Jackson films, but there are certain designs, whether it be the staff, whether it be the Balrog, whether it be the door to Khazad-dûm, they are very similar to their counterparts in the Jackson films. To my knowledge, those are two separate continuities. Obviously, like the Rings of Power show leads into the Lord of the Rings. I'm using, air quotes here, but the Lord of the Rings as we know it in the Jackson films isn't the Lord of the Rings in the book. So it's like two separate continuities that kind of discuss the same topic.
Celebrimbor calls him the Lord of the Rings, Sauron.
Yes, yeah, we did get that,
that's like
you talking about the door of Khazad-dûm, where they say the way to open it is the Elvish word for friend.
Yes,
I feel like that was the same one. It was obviously like nodding to that door.
Yeah, correct. But even the Balrog was very, very, very similar to the Balrog of the Lord of the Rings films. Like it was almost like a 1-to-1 design. I don't know if there's like any variation at all, really. I don't know if they got the rights to use those designs for this show, if that was like an intent, or if there's like a variation on the design that's like so imperceptible that they can't be sued or something. I don't know. But I thought that was a really interesting just thing, that there's so many similarities in visual design to the movies that it's clearly intentional.
The Balrog looked amazing. Like it looked so good. Like the animation that they used, the CG it was crazy.
I think for example, the Alamo Drafthouse is playing the Lord of the Rings currently right now. I think that the Jackson camp would be a little short-sighted not to allow them to access everyone's member berries by showing us Narsil, by showing us the Balrog in the same form, by showing us the door. And then with the doors, one of my favorite parts is, he says that it will only be accessible to friends.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
and then,
yes.
I like how they set that up. I thought that was great. The Lord of the Rings mention wistfully brings me back to one of the greatest movies of all time, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen with Sean Connery. And at one point he goes, "This league is extraordinary." And, I just loved when it was like, "The Lord of the Rings." Like, I just wish that they would have just flashed to like, the kind of movie posters in that second, just to kind of like drive it home a little bit more.
I like where your head's at. There was I forget what the name of the Twitter account is at this point, but like maybe like 2 years ago or whatever, there was like a Twitter account where they kept like fake quoting the name of the movie in like the text, the contextual text of the film. So like it'd be like a gif of like Harry Potter, and it's just like, this is just like Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets or something like that. It looks like the character's saying that, but it's not. But anyway, yeah. So I did chuckle at the Lord of the Rings quotes and all that. I thought that was pretty funny. Let's talk a little more about the Balrog, because I think King Durin had a quite noble end, even though like it was all, by his own making, I guess. Obviously, he's being heavily influenced by the ring, heavily influenced by Sauron, who doesn't want the armies of the dwarves to show up on the doorstep of Eregion to stop the battle.
Yeah, I was saying the exact thing, that he noticed that Balrog, and it's like, okay, like that.
That was a cool scene too. That was a cool scene where like he's just like, oh, I just got rejected by the king, and he turns his head and he like looks into the fire, and he's just like, oh, there's a Balrog down there. Let me get that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess nothing will sober up our mind like a Balrog, because like he took the ring off after that. I mean, that was crazy, dude.
Scene. That was such a cool scene, dude.
Yeah,
there's a lot of cool scenes in this show, but that one where he's just like, I'm just gonna full send charge at this like ancient demon of darkness and see what happens.
Yeah, man. Balrog of Morgoth, man. That was really cool, and it was like a really nice moment of reconciliation between Prince and King, and
yes,
and pretty much passing the baton, like to and calling his son King Durin, and yeah, it was nice. Like he was saying, he was talking about Prince Durin was talking about how they would arm wrestle, and that his father would like kind of let him, linger a little bit before slamming him down. And he was like, that wasn't me letting you do it. That was just you getting stronger, just like you are now. And I really liked that moment that they had. I really liked, like, I loved the dwarves. Like even the first and second season, like I just felt like their scenes were so good, and the chemistry between Durin and Disa were amazing. Like, they were believable that they were a married couple, and that they respected each other. They would bump heads sometimes, but they really respected each other in the end of the day. But they had such strong characters, and I really enjoyed them. Every time I saw them on screen, I was like happy to see them.
Yeah, those two actors specifically had such excellent chemistry. Whenever they're on the screen, it's going to be something that you're going to think about for the next couple hours. Just they just hold such weight in that room. So, really quick, we should really talk a little bit about Rune and Gandalf and Tom Bombadil. We know that Tom Bombadil gives him the ultimatum of friends or destiny, and he chooses friends plus destiny. We don't know that until the end, but he chooses friends, and ultimately this plays into the Dark Wizard's hands, and we find out that the Dark Wizard is one of the 5 Istar. That includes Gandalf, that includes Saruman, that includes Radagast, and there's another blue wizard somewhere out there. So there's 2 blue wizards. This is one of the unnamed wizards. It's interesting that they're not giving them the character a name. I feel like maybe they will going forward, because he's clearly not done. He's clearly still in the game.
Yeah. What are we gonna do if we don't have a whole season dedicated to figuring out someone's damn name? I mean, it wouldn't be the Rings of Power.
I was very confused when Annatar showed up. I'm like, wait, Lord of Gifts? I don't buy this.
I mean, I think they even kind of hid the joke in the show, because Merrimack apparently doesn't find out his name is Merrimack until about 1.5 years before we meet him, and he seems to be at least 17. So, for 15 and a half years, they were calling him nobody. And I think it's just because they're like, oh, yeah, there's nobody with the long beard, nobody with the blonde hair in the water, and now there's nobody with the beard in the desert.
How do you guys feel about I kind of feel it was like randomly sprung on, but the romance between Merrimack and Poppy. What are you guys' thoughts?
I do like that moment when they kiss and she asks, like, did you eat lizard for supper?
Oh, that was disgusting because, like, I obviously can't, like, picture the smell of lizard or taste of lizard, but I can understand, like, scents remaining on someone during intimacy. So, yeah, that's interesting.
But, I mean, her Poppy leaves with that group.
And so does Nori, doesn't she? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Nori and Poppy kind of I think they take the reins of that group a little bit because they know what it is to move and be nomadic. That group really doesn't. So I'm assuming that they're gonna kind of teach him how to do that. And that was interesting because, I thought that we would at least have Nori for another season.
We might still. She might show up like, you think I'd leave you? You didn't get very far. Blah, blah, blah.
No, but it's...
We did have Poppy do the same.
Don't you know that this song that I've been singing for the past couple seasons talks about exactly what's happening right now?
Poppy did that, right? At the beginning of this season.
Yeah. That's exactly what she... So, who knows? I don't know.
These extended goodbyes could just be like a big fake out.
Yeah, but how do you guys feel about her leaving Gandalf? Like, was there ample justification for that? Obviously, like, everything that Gandalf touches seems to, he brings destruction wherever he goes. Really,
yeah.
But
I think that she realizes that he's really now at this point where he's his path is, he's going down a path that she really can't follow. She was, a lot of it was helping him because he didn't really, he didn't really have control over his powers. He didn't know who he was. Now he kind of like knew who he was. You saw how they kind of like led, like how they like did his name. They called him Grand Elf, and it was like that was super close to Gandalf.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay.
They kept doing that because, like, with the staff being called the Gans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I think that she had a justification. I mean, man, he's dangerous. He's dangerous. Although, I mean, caring, but he's a being. He's a whole other being from a different plane of existence.
Excellent way to put it. Yeah, like he literally does not belong in this mortal plane. So the fact that he does exist and is causing such chaos literally seemingly every single day, like literally like a week ago they got sent up in a tornado that he created, like a sandstorm tornado. So I totally get it, like if you need a break, you need a break.
I like how it ends with him talking to Tom and saying, they're going to call me Gandalf, aren't they?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because it almost harkens back to when he becomes Gandalf the White and they call him Gandalf and he's just like, Gandalf, that's what they used to call me. Like it's almost like there's a barrier between when he gets his name to when he needs to regain it after he becomes the White Wizard.
Right. At least he doesn't have... Well, I mean, at least we don't know. Because, I was going to say, like, well, at least he didn't have to go through this, like, whole period of, like, figuring everything out again. But we don't know because, by the time we get to him, he's already at, Gandalf the White. So, this is probably, like, a glimpse of, like, what happens after he kind of, I guess, reincarnates or whatever, gets sent from whatever plane he was at to Middle Earth.
I think next season we need a whole arc on him figuring out what his color is.
Oh yeah.
Am I Gandalf the Red? Gandalf the Pink? Gandalf the Gray? No, too boring.
No, next season
it's a Goldilocks thing of like black too dark, white too bright, gray just right.
Next season is going to be him getting his outfit and then picking up the pipe.
He needs that pipe.
Yes.
Yeah, another thing too, like, is the staff looks like the staff that he has in Like besides that, like there's like a little crystal that he has in the staff. The actual formation of the staff looks like the formation of the staff that he has in the Lord of the Rings film.
Yes.
So Rich, you might be right. Where they obviously talked to the Jackson camp. They were just like, hey, please let us use some of the rights to some of these designs so that we can have a cohesive project. Obviously, we're not treading on any of your shoes. You're not treading on any of ours. Hopefully, we can make this work. And I think that's what ultimately happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think the synergy is, you don't want to have a Sony situation, so you have to watch Morbius or something like that. So I think this like little kind of agreement, and it's not, I think it's advantageous for both camps, right?
I think so, yeah.
I've definitely rewatched The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings movies numerous. Like, I don't want to tell you guys how many times I've rewatched them since the first season of Rings of Power. Like, I watched them before Rings of Power, then I watched Rings of Power, then I watched them again, then I watched them again, then I watched them in preparation. Like, they've been getting a lot of extra views from me alone because I just need to like cross-reference. I need to watch something again. I need to double-check information. It's just... I think it's smart. It ties them together, and hopefully there will be at some point. I'm sure, Bezos. It was really difficult for him to somehow come up with a lucrative offer to nudge the Jackson camp in the direction of allowing them to use that.
Yeah, it must have been very difficult with his notoriously, empty pockets.
I mean, you don't even pay for shipping, if you're a Prime member. So.
Guys, I think that brings our discussion of the Rings of Power to a close. Anthony, do you have any final thoughts on these last 4 episodes / the entirety of the Rings of Power? Like, what are your thoughts now?
Well, one last thing. We didn't even like talk too much about just like one last like thought. Isildur, like it seems like he's heading off back to Numenor. Not really knowing what he's heading back off to. And that little romance that he was having with, was it Estrid?
Estrid, yeah.
Seems to be done with because of...
Well, the guy's still there, yeah. It was a really awkward, like, kind of goodbye. Like, there's a moment where, like, he invites her to Numenor in front of...
Yes, that was super awkward.
They all just kind of like look at him, and then like he grabs her hand, and then like, yeah, it's awkward. I don't want to.
Well, to be fair, that vixen came into his like little seaside shanty, and she professed her love for him, and he said, "Why are you telling me this?" And then she kind of jumped his bones like he was the CEO shooter.
Jumped his bones like he was. Yes, I totally agree, Rich. I saw exactly what you saw, but. Yeah, I thought that was awkward too. I'm excited to see what happens when he gets back to Numenor, because I cannot wait for his sister Aarion, who's based her entire political career on the fact that her brother died, supposedly in Middle-earth, to see that her brother's alive, just to be crushed. I just want to see her sister's soul crushed before coming to the light. That's all I want to see.
Also, why is she not upset about her other brother that we never see? Like, she's okay with this attack on the faithful, and her brother is off on, like, some pilgrimage, I believe, on the western side of Numenor. So we have 2 brothers coming up. We're going to have Durin's brother showing up, and we're going to have, hopefully, Isildur and her brother showing up.
The other brother's going to show up like, what the heck happened?
Brothers galore. Galadriel's brother's gonna come in like, psych, still alive.
Oh yeah, that's like another thing that we missed also. Galadriel had a final showdown with Sauron.
I'm glad to hear a good hearty laugh out of Rich on that one. Yeah, dude, so much happens in these episodes, so much to talk about.
And he ends up with the 9.
Yeah, Sauron has the 9 rings. Like, what is he gonna do with them? Where is he going? Does he bring one to Tom Bombadil just for him to be like, I don't want that?
Well, and then now he has the backing of. He has an army now.
Sauron now has an army. He's probably going right back to Mordor. yeah, lots to look forward to in a couple years. Hopefully, if they ever make a third season of this, I hope they do. Obviously, they will.
I think Jeff's got the pockets. We'll see the whole thing seen through.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I like to believe that this show is Bezos's passion project. You know, like he really wants specifically this story told. So I'm hopeful that we'll see it through to fruition.
Yeah.
But yeah,
guys,
like
I'll say last thoughts. Both of these seasons were really good. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan and you heard bad things about Rings of Power, I say give them a chance yourself. Formulate your own opinion. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So I wanna jump on that point because I purposely, since The Acolyte, have been straying from watching shows on a weekly basis. Just not because I didn't like The Acolyte, just because I didn't like the overall online attitude and conversation surrounding The Acolyte. So I didn't watch Rings of Power as it was coming out. I didn't watch Agatha All Along. I still haven't watched Agatha All Along. I didn't watch The Penguin as it was coming out. Like I was just like burnt out on just the weekly structure of shows. So I didn't really give it a chance when it was coming out again, obviously. But one thing I remember seeing online was that, a lot of people were taking umbrage at the fact that there's a scene where an orc has a family and a child, and it's like showing too much sympathy for the orcs. But really, it's a 5-second scene max, and it's just like it's a one-off shot. And obviously, like this makes sense for the orcs. Obviously, they don't just pop out of the mud like we see in Lord of the Rings. That's a very specific type of orc. So I didn't really. I'm confused at the vitriol that people just seem to throw at things these days, I guess. So I'm happy to announce, as someone who is, I would say, fairly critical of certain things, like reasonable things. I feel like I'm a very reasonable critic. I'm happy to say that the second season really blew me away.
Yeah.
Rich?
I think what's great about the series for me is I said it the whole time. I believe that once you've seen the second season, because so many characters become so much more likable, Isildur makes so much more sense. Theo is just like an annoying teenager in this first season, and then like his mom randomly dies, but he becomes so much better, I think, and interesting with his relationship with Isildur. I think that even his sister becomes slightly more interesting when we see her finally see what's going on with her father, and she brings the queen and everything's there.
I agree. Yeah.
Did Halbrand enchant the creature to make sure to spit Muriel out to create a further divide in Numenor? Did he see that coming? Was that even a thing? Like, there's so many things now that you can look back and wonder, like, what was at play? And I think it's weird because it's a weird bit of storytelling where if this were a George R.R. Martin book where you had the POV scenes, right? And then by the end, things are happening concurrently. You find out more. I think it works so much better. It's almost like obviously it came from a book. That's the source material. But there's something to be said about like the medium of television that doesn't perfectly fit it. Mm-hmm. And then by the end of season 2, I think now that you have all this extra information, it becomes so much better.
Jumping onto what you said, I do not believe that Sauron had anything to do with Muriel's saving in that scene. If their religion is stemmed off of the Valar and their belief as like the faithful of Numenor, I don't think he necessarily has anything to do with just creatures and places as a whole. Outside of his initial plan for them. Mm-hmm. So I think this was actually like she was proven innocent in front of the Valar sort of thing. That's my takeaway from what I saw. I don't have any like book knowledge to back that up. That's just from what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I love that kind of stuff. I really enjoyed this season. Guys, thank you so much for listening to us here for our 103rd episode of Project Geekology. Next week, we're going to be covering not Rings of Power, but, it's going to be adjacent to it. We're going to be talking about the War of the Rohirrim, which is an animated project that connects to the original trilogy of Lord of the Rings films. I think it occurs 183 years before the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So very exciting stuff happening in the Peter Jackson camp. I don't think it's directed by Peter Jackson, but he's one of the producers on that. Be here next week for episode 104 as we discuss that. Rich is joining us again. Thankfully, we love his insight here. And, hopefully more Met stuff happens that he can, gush about in the coming weeks. If you want to check out our socials, check out our show notes down below, wherever you're listening to your podcast. You'll find our location on Twitter, on Instagram, and so on, so that you can follow us more closely for upcoming episode details, as well as personal projects that we're working on. And yeah, thank you so much. We will talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Namaste.